Resurrection Without Cross, March 31, 2017. From Christine Preston, with extracts from Master Jesus and Mother Mary's messages, as well as a message from Ascended Twin Flame. Christine, I act as a messenger for the Great White Brotherhood, the spiritual hierarchy of Ascended Masters and Archangels that is operating from the higher dimensions of our system. I receive messages, including word-for-word dictations, or thought transmissions of light codes, or notions, from the higher realms, by the method of telepathic communication. When the ability to receive these communications appeared, I underwent some training, and after this I was informed that I had been accepted as a messenger. I have explained in the video introduction to the Ascension listed on Matt McElroy's website, that this phenomenon is not unique, and that it is, because the light is causing changes in our DNA, that certain psychic abilities are appearing. There will be a time when everybody will be student of the God within. And it will be the end of skepticism, and of arguments about whether a notion is true, or not. Since the election of President Donald Trump, we are in a period of transition with disclosure taking place. As explained in my previous videos, published by Matt McElroy, as well as more recently, by The Secret Garden, the new narratives, new perceptions, as well as disclosure, are the result of mankind being moved up upon the ladder of the dimensions, both in consciousness and in physicality. The process of ascension and its effects are the result of a clearing up and disentanglement carried out by the forces of the light. New points of view are appearing, or are being allowed to be expressed in the media. You could also say that new paradigms are emerging, but it is just that truths have been suppressed, and this is now being exposed. A battle is still taking place between the forces of the light and those of the dark that I have called the arch-deceivers in my last video. The latter are resilient to give up their power and control, and this is related to the Armageddon of the psyche, as souls are slowly being disentangled from what has been keeping them in bondage. We have recently heard that the UK's Prime Minister, Theresa May, has set everything in motion for Brexit to become a tangible reality for Britain. This is but the beginning, and an early stage in the liberation that is going to take place for the countries of Europe, in a parallel way to that of the United States of America. It is a liberation from the symbolic beast of Babylon of the Book of Revelation. I have recently received messages concerning the two main notions which constitute the main tool of the dark forces to keep mankind under their control, as well as the foundation of their worst conspiracies. These subjects are, in the first place, NASA's lies to perpetuate the Copernicus and gravity theories that are in relation to the idea that Earth is a globe, but please note that my last videos have pointed to the idea that Genesis has borrowed notions from the ancient Sumerian and Babylonian traditions, as well as the Gnostic scriptures. I have also pointed out that researchers should not make conclusions based upon a literal interpretation of the Old Testament. However, the new science which derives from observations together with the Vedic, or Hindu, ancient cosmology, is in my view a breakthrough. I have received messages from Archangel Michael concerning the fact the physical plane is a platform of life. The second point is in relation to an historical falsification by the method of a literary tool, which has resulted with millions of people being indoctrinated, or as, if they were placed under a spell, by a crucifixion story that only took place in the Gospels written, as demonstrated by some scholars, by the Flavian emperors. The first subject has been discussed in my previous two videos, and for the matter of the crucifixion, or of the resurrection without the cross, we are revisiting the Master Jesus as well as Mother Mary's messages I received last year. I have a new text for the notions related to the resurrection and ascension without the cross, which will be given at the end of this Expose. Christine, before presenting some clarifications with regard to the doctrine of sacrifice which is central to the notion of the crucifixion, I would like to revisit the message I have received from the Master Jesus that was published on December 24, 2016. It is as follows. Master Jesus, Christ's Forgotten Works in Avalon, Part 2. Christine, having listened to the video Christ's Forgotten Works in Avalon and as Melchizedek text I prepared on December 22, 2016, I received a telepathic communication from the Master Jesus, and he gave me the following message. Master Jesus, I am not sure you, and the light workers have understood that I was not crucified in actual fact. I was crucified in the version written by the Flavian Emperor. They created the Gospels. I know this is rather a controversial claim, and more explanations will be needed in the future. My mother, whom you call Mother Mary, gave you a dictation in which she said that I did not die on any cross, and this is true, but you thought it may have meant that I survived the crucifixion. I have let this go on for a while to allow you as well as the light workers to get used to the idea that it was only in the falsified Gospels that the scenario of my sacrifice on a cross, as well as death, appeared. It has been a bit of a confusing matter for you. What I want to also say is that you were with me in those days as my daughter, Melissa, and this has not been recorded. What the Flavian scribe did was to try and show that the Romans were right, or superior, and that no one should oppose them, so they concocted this story of sacrifice upon a cross as the Romans actually used this method of crucifixion, just as today the electric chair is used in the United States of America. Why did they then suggest an actual resurrection from the dead? Because they wanted to use this concept to grip the people with a concept they had misunderstood. It was when they organized their body of works called the canon, because they were canonical in opposition to apocryphal. This means they were mainstream to them by opposition to works they didn't regard as having value in respect of the new doctrine that had been devised by Constantine and his theological advisors. He had decided that the way to control the population was to falsify Christ's teachings. Those teachings were indeed Gnostic and esoteric. He wanted the population to remain ignorant of their divine connection in the heart to the I Am that could liberate them, and permit them to ascend. For political reasons he thought he could use a falsification of my teachings to exercise control over the conquered people of the Roman Empire. Hence the doctrine of sacrifice was brought into being, together with the idea of a Son of God who was unique, and superior, and had been sacrificed by his own Father, to die for the sins of man, to redeem those sins, as, if that could permit them to enter the kingdom of heaven. What was totally left out of the doctrine was the concept of the conquest of the human nature, and the resurrection from this mortal nature which is due to false perceptions, and acceptance of mortality. Ascension has been known in antiquity, and the dark forces had attempted to suppress knowledge about it. Hence for thousands of years the forces in power have indoctrinated mankind with a scenario written by some Roman emperors, or their scribe Flavius Joseph, who had studied Jewish history, and the Messianic movement at Qumran. He used some early records, and some original copies were destroyed after the canonical Gospels were completed. The Templars as well as certain sects rejected this doctrine, and were demonized for this. It was not me, or Christ, the Templars rejected, but the story of crucifixion associated with an atonement for an original sin. The idea of such a sin was taken from Genesis chapter 3 in which Adam and Eve, though they are not yet named, in that chapter, apparently sin, because they eat of the forbidden tree of knowledge of good and evil. Mankind is experiencing an awakening, and rise in consciousness that is parallel to the personal overcoming and transcendence of the human nature. You are to resurrect from the mortal consciousness. You will experience resurrection in the sense of this overcoming, and it will first be experienced as healing, and changes as a result of the coming shift to fourth density. This is a shift that is global, and in relation to planet Earth's ascension to the fifth dimension. The way to a life free of disease and death is not for the immediate future, but you will be receiving teachings and instruction in preparation for that final shift. For the time being, at the end of this year of 2016, expect gradual changes in your physical body that will reflect the shift to fourth density. You have acquired a different perception of reality, one that corresponds to the spirituality of the fifth kingdom, or fifth dimension. You are entering the realm upon which your third eye chakra will function with greater magical power to create new Gaia. This is but the beginning. I am your servant friend, Master Jesus, leaving you for now in love and peace. Christine, in this message, the Master Jesus referred to the one Mother Mary gave me, and that was published on February 28, 2016. It was entitled Truth, Precipitation, and was a dictation directly to paper, and word for word. Here is an extract from it as it was very long. Mother Mary, February 28, 2016. Mother Mary, yes, it is me, Mother Mary, and I would like you to use what you have written last night with Archangel Faith, and your ascended twin flame Andre, as being a teaching from my heart, a teaching that I support, and could not have put in better words. I especially like your historical research concerning Constantine's alteration of my son's original teachings. He turned it into a doctrine with despicable connotations of a sacrifice on the cross being necessary for the salvation of mankind, when the potential is within your heart. It is the threefold flame, your connection with your I Am. It is that image of Christ that you mirror into the matter world. You have it within you. My son did not have to die on a cross for the sins of mankind. Those so-called sins in the Garden of Eden were a misuse of power that caused the downfall of Atlantis. That episode of history is told in Genesis. All of that section concerning the old world before the flood relates to the Atlantean era. That misuse of the light resulted with a karmic debt that had to be balanced, or repaid. You have the tools the Ascended Masters have provided to make this repayment, to bring the world through the process of ascension. It is part of it. One Master dying on a cross, shedding his blood, is not a sacrifice that could repay this karma, this misuse of energy. Mankind still has to go through a long process of transformation, at the core of its psyche, to ascend to higher consciousness. What was achieved by my son was his own ascension. And also he provided a balance of light in the world by his presence, in the company of the souls that had come into embodiment to work with him. It was as it is today. You provide a new paradigm of being, just by being present, and by seeking to fulfill your own destiny in alignment with the will of God. My son, Yeshua ben Joseph, Issa, or Jesus, actually did not die on a cross. He was not even put on a cross. The Gnostics knew this. You can imagine it is a very delicate and controversial subject. The Templars also knew this. They didn't reject Christ, but Constantine's doctrine, because it was devised for the control of the masses. Sacrifice was typically Roman. Just know this for the time being, as it is not possible to expand on this subject in this dictation. Know that there is a true teaching hidden in the scriptures. It is esoteric. It requires interpretation. Jesus taught the principle of reincarnation during his life 2,000 years ago. It has been removed from the New Testament. He went to India, and Tibet, and was educated in the blessed Isles of Britain by Druids. I moved to Avalon with Joseph of Arimathea, and built a wattle church in that place called Glastonbury. I just wanted to mention a few words about this. It is true that some of the ancient kings of Britain were descendants of Arimathea. To come back to the subject being discussed, the spirituality that should have manifested in the timelines following our presence on Earth 2,000 years ago, was impeded, obstructed. The negative forces created a system of belief appearing to be a religion, but behind its bright facade was a very subtle instrument of deception, the doctrine of atonement, this sacrifice on the cross. Furthermore, insisting on the exclusive nature of its revelation, or the uniqueness of Christ, as the only Son of God, the Roman Church raised Jesus upon a pedestal of worship corresponding to Roman idolatry. Millions of people are blind to this fact today. They insisted he should be worshipped in order for mankind to gain the glory of paradise. But only after death. Faith, and commitment to the doctrine had to be blind. Disclosure is the great event that is about to unfold. It will disclose the suppression of truth. It has already started as the truth has been exposed about different categories of subjects, one by one in the mainstream media. A replacement in governance of that nation, which was destined to be an example of democracy, and instead has been infiltrated down to its core, and leadership by the forces of darkness, is shortly to take place. Following this, a phase of disclosure will begin with the scandalous matter of betrayal related to 9/11. I am Mother Mary, confirming to Christine that this notion is correct. She takes my dictation, and doesn't know what is coming next. But, while listening to one of Donald Trump's speeches recently, something he said made her suspect that Archangel Gabriel's last announcement concerning a disclosure may have been related to that subject of 9/11. Some ideas concerning a disclosure on that subject have spread many years ago, but in the mainstream media this is still regarded as a conspiracy theory. However, of course, if a new president, one who, by the way, needs to be extremely resilient, dynamic, and vigorous, to be able to oppose the establishment, if that one told you that the 9/11 was an inside job to create an enemy, create the idea of terrorism, to serve the mechanism of the war industries, the number of doubting Thomas would drop sharply. And I am now revealing, as Christine is noting word for word, in this method of dictation, that Archangel Gabriel's announcement alluded to this particular topic. We are entering a phase of disclosure entailing a complete dismantling of the various systems of thought created by the powers of darkness in recent decades. These were also built upon the legacy inherited during thousands of years of slavery under the Anunnaki. I am referring to the system that has kept you in ignorance and darkness. It is a system that allowed academics and researchers to accumulate a wealth of data and knowledge, but within the box of the exoteric confines. Ascended twin flame Andre on resurrection without the cross. Received March 31, 2017. Christine, greetings lightworkers. The crucifixion is central to the doctrine of sacrifice and atonement for a sin stated in the Old Testament which the Roman Church has called the original sin. It caused the fall from paradise. However, what the fathers of the Church have cleverly done is that they have put the blame on mankind for the loss of a golden age, that of Lemuria, through the Atlantean decline and downfall of the Atlantean civilization, which were due to the Atlantean progeny that misused the power they genetically inherited from the sons of God who were sent as initiators. That progeny, as demonstrated in the message from Mother Mary that explains why Archangel Michael fashioned his sword of blue flame, was not the souls of the present mankind, but the incarnation of laggards that recreated the civilization they had previously known, and were represented as Cain, spelled Cain, in Genesis. They were the reason that murder, and corruption, in fact all unrighteousness appeared. As you know from the Book of Enoch, The fallen watchers were bound by Archangel Michael, and then kept in chain in the bottomless pits, the astral plane, or abysses. They were the same as the dragon of Revelation that was cast on earth, and that after the Atlantean disasters were prevented from incarnating until about 2,000 years ago, because they had misused psychic powers. These fallen souls have been called archons, Nephilim, fallen angels, Luciferian, and arch-deceivers. Their genetic manipulations as told in the Nag Hammadi text were from a previous time, in the Tiamat days. They were allowed incarnation in the Lemurian days, and caused the downfall of civilization in Atlantean days. They were given a second, or third chance to incarnate, and learn the lessons of life in the post-Diluvian world. They had an agenda to enslave the souls that have a thread to the I Am Presence, or spirit within. In bondage. In addition to the original sin not being mankind's transgression, the fact that these light-bearers possess a link to the I Am Presence, is the reason that they do not need a sacrifice, or atonement, to ascend to heaven, or the higher dimension. They have the potential for this ascension, and in fact, one of the reasons that the Master Jesus incarnated was to let them know about this, and he taught them how to pray to the Father in heaven to activate the process of ascension. Now, Christianity speaks of Jesus as dying on a cross to save you. And you know that the ascension involves the integration of Christ consciousness, as well as the transmutation of the negative aspects within the personality, and in fact, to externalize and reflect the qualities that the idea of Christ personifies. It is something that you can do yourself, and that no one else can do for you. You have a threefold flame within your heart, and you have a Christ self, or blueprint, that you have to reflect. Furthermore, the path of ascension is not one to follow, but to become. By doing so you create the fifth kingdom, and you are awakening into the reality of physical angels, as the human kingdom is the fourth. Understand the systematic theology hidden in the Bible. Though the ancient records originally contained many truths, the problem is that the recollection, or records, were edited, or rearranged to form the canonical scriptures of the Roman Church. The concept of an ascension, or resurrection, as a liberation from the consciousness of death and mortality, was previously known in Egypt, and there are plenty of studies demonstrating this. The Roman Church then claimed a uniqueness of divinity for the character the Flavian emperors created. They elevated a human being to divine status so he would be worshipped in the same manner as the Roman gods. All of this was a strategy of control. They suppressed the truth concerning the possibility of integrating higher consciousness. The Gnostics knew about the potential for doing so. They called it the spirit within. This is why their beliefs were esoteric. The Roman Church claimed God sacrificed his own Son on a cross to atone for the sins of mankind. That original sin was depicted in Genesis 3 as a temptation by a serpent in the Garden of Eden. But this tree was the forbidden tree of the intellectual argument, as well as the political propaganda of the dark forces that opposed the teachings of the mystical schools of the Ascended Masters, or High Priests of Lemuria, symbolized as a tree of life that can be associated with the I Am Presence. This tree of life is represented in many ancient cosmologies. The story told in Genesis chapter 3 is a recollection of the drama that took place during the Lemurian decline before Atlantis appeared, as it did after the laggards separated from the Lemurian motherland. It is cryptic, but still contains the notion that the serpent was a deceitful liar. It represents the arch-deceivers, the archons of an earlier primordial time. The idea of sacrificing one's son is a dark concept, and the Old Testament already gives you the message that it is erroneous in the episode in which Archangel Michael stops Abraham from sacrificing his own son, Isaac. So, Why did the Roman Church profess that God sacrificed his only Son to save mankind, and then never explain the spiritual mechanics of this salvation? The concept is obviously in line with the Roman belief of practicing sacrifices to obtain a favor. You will find plenty of evidence that the story of crucifixion was a scenario that the dark forces plotted, or of wishful thinking on their part. It is what they conspired to do to mankind with their agendas. Christine, there is additional information that may lead to the conclusion that the theme of resurrection with the sacrifice on the cross was inspired from a notion that existed in antiquity, especially in the East. The information is from Joshua D. Stone, and his channeling of the Master Drawl Cool about 2 decades ago. It's the idea that the person taking the fourth initiation is in suffering, and has laid all things relating to the personality, in the flame, or altar of sacrifice. He becomes a master of wisdom, operates on the Buddhic plane of consciousness, and is liberated from the karmic wheel of incarnations. He becomes a member of the spiritual hierarchy. Then in the fifth initiation the transmutation of the lower nature of this initiate has been compared to its crucifixion. At the fifth initiation, which is cosmic, this person becomes an adept. He has the choice to preserve his body, or manifest a new one by will. In antiquity the ascended masters passed into the spiritual world, but they now return, or continue their service in the physical world. The person who ascends inhabits the light body that has been created by his attraction of the light throughout his incarnations. There is a lot more to say about this subject, but we will have to leave it for another time. Leaving you in the light of the ascended masters, and the archangels. Christine.